Can everyone see my screen? Just making sure.
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so thank you everyone for joining us today. So the purpose, I guess, of today's session is, to give you kind of like, we'll start with a broad overview of work authorizations available to international students. We'll also address some common misconceptions, as well as things to be mindful of when looking for jobs in the United States. And then, of course, in the end, we'll give a good amount of time for you to ask any questions you may have for us. Because before we begin, I just quickly wanted to introduce the OISS staff to you, just because we have a lot of new faces. So we want to make sure that you know who we are, what we do. So we have Amanda Connolly. She is our director, and she is here with us today. So she is the one who oversees the whole office and makes sure that everything runs smoothly. We have Nicole Hunley. She is the associate director, and she primarily works with scholars as well as students in the College of Health. You have me, Olga Scarpero. I primarily work with students in the colleges of business and engineering. So if you ever have, any questions, concerns about your immigration status, you can always reach out to me directly. We have Patricia Bevin. She is the assistant director for programming. So she's the one who organizes a lot of amazing events for you throughout the year. The next big one is our International Bazaar. It will be in April. I don't remember the date now, Amanda.
It's Sunday, April 24th from 1 to 4, and it's going to be on the UC lawn, barring any rain. So come join us. It'll be really fun.
Yes. We have Stephen Didak. He's the International Student and Scholar Advisor, and he mostly works with students in the College of Arts and Sciences and Education. And then finally, we have Melanie Contreras, who is our Administrative Assistant Coordinator, and she is the one you see first when you come to the office. So this is Amanda and I, and we will be doing today's session for you. So the first thing that we thought would be useful to address is the difference between your degree name and the name of the major that is listed on your I-20. So we get a lot of questions about it, like that, oh, my program is financial engineering. Why does it say financial mathematics on my I-20? Is that correct? So I guess the answer to this question is the university assigns a zip code to each program of study. So the university determined that the most kind of appropriate code for financial engineering is 270305. And then when we create I-20s in CVIS, we have to use this code. And in CVIS, this code corresponds to financial mathematics. And that's why on your I-20, it says financial mathematics. So both names have the same zip code, right? And then it kind of tells the government that both programs have the same content, even though the names are different. So I hope that kind of explains the discrepancy for you and makes it a little bit more clear. So when it comes to the employment option, so the US government has kind of very strict rules when it comes to the employment of international students. So for the government, the main purpose for students is to come to the United States and study instead of working. But you do have some options, and then we'll talk about them now. So when it comes to the on-campus employment, as an international student, you are allowed to work on campus, and you don't need to have any work authorization for that. Typically, employment is limited to 20 hours per week when school is in session, and then you can work full-time during official school breaks. Any off-campus employment, though, requires prior work authorization. And we're talking about paid, unpaid, doesn't matter. Like if you are doing any work off campus, you have to have a work authorization for that. So typically, there are like two main work authorizations for international students, CPT and OPT. So we'll start with CPT. CPT stands for Curricular Practical Training. And it is a work authorization for off-campus employment. There is an integral part of your academic curriculum. So it means that you could get CPT if an internship, for example, is a required part of your degree program. We could authorize CPT if you are doing an internship for credit. You could also do CPT if an internship is directly related to one of the courses you are taking kind of at the time of the internship. And CPT can only be done prior to graduation, so while you're still a student. Just like a non-campus job, CPT is limited to 20 hours per week when school is in session, and then it can be full-time during official school breaks. Part-time CPT does not affect your OPT eligibility, but if you do 12 or more months of full-time CPT, you will become ineligible for OPT after graduation. One of the main things here is to be eligible for CPT, you have to be enrolled for at least one full academic year, and then typically it's like fall and spring before you become eligible for CPT. So let's move to OPT. OPT stands for Optional Practical Training. It is also a work authorization for off-campus employment that is directly related to your degree, but unlike CPT, it is usually done after graduation. So all F1 students get 12 months of OPT after graduation. You don't need to have a job offer to apply for OPT, but you cannot exceed 90 days of unemployment like once your OPT starts. So OPT is just like an opportunity for you to gain experience in your field of study after graduation. So students in the STEM field could get additional 2 years of OPT, and financial engineering is a STEM degree, so you could get up to 3 years of OPT. To be eligible for OPT extension, though, you will have to have a paid position, and it will have to be with an E-verified company. So like for those of you who are not kind of familiar with what E-verify is, so E-verify is kind of like a government system that some companies enroll in, and then through that system they are able to verify if an employee is eligible to work in the United States or not. So when you find a job on OPT, not all employers are E-verified, right? So when you find a job on OPT, I would just recommend you to check with the employer to make sure that they are E-verified, and then this way you will know if you can use them for the OPT extension or not. Another common kind of work visa is H-1B. So H-1B is a specialty occupation visa for temporary employment. And it's typically for 3 years, but then it can be extended for additional 3 years. You cannot apply for H-1B yourself. You will have to find an employer who is willing to sponsor you for H-1B. And then based on that, so H-1B is employer specific. So you can only work for the employer who files an H-1B on your behalf. And then H-1B is a lottery-based system, and there is a limit on the number of H-1Bs granted each year. And if I'm not mistaken, it's 85,000 per year. There is a limit of 85,000 H-1Bs per year. So this was just kind of a general overview of work authorizations available to students. We do have like a much more detailed information on our website. So make sure that to visit our website, review the information there. If you have any more questions, you can always reach out to us directly. And now I will pass it to Amanda.
So we wanted to make sure you guys, there are some really common misconceptions that we just wanted to make sure that you guys were aware of. And these are things that I know Patrick put a question in the chat about what is employment. And I put a sort of general definition of employment. I think one thing we want to make sure you guys are aware of is that the definition of employment is the same as it was 50 years ago per the immigration regulations. So it hasn't kept up with what is actually possible. So things that you might not see as employment could potentially be considered employment. This might be being an influencer on Instagram, or anything where you are, earning compensation or providing services or labor for money or some sort of compensation remuneration. It could be food, it could be clothing, it could be housing. So employment is a pretty broad thing. So we just want you guys to keep that in mind, that anytime you're doing something off campus, where you could be doing work or providing a service and earning any type of compensation or remuneration for that, could be considered employment. So it's really broad. Patrick.
Yeah, just very quickly, but you're referring to compensation either with food or money, but it's important for us right now because I'm putting together an internship, which I believe is a wrong word, but it's more of a practical training co-op program where students will go into companies and they would not necessarily be compensated. And I don't want to have not in the summer, but let's say in the fall or in the winter. So I want to make it sure that when they work for a company 20 hours a week, they do it for the experience more than the money. That they, and international, they don't have to seek approval, even though they might put on their resume, this was an internship wrongly. That's my concern here.
Yeah, and so we probably need to talk a little bit more about that as you're developing that course with you, me, and Olga. But generally, that's where CPT, Olga talked about CPT. If it's curricular, so if they're earning academic credit for it and it's taking place elsewhere, it likely needs some sort of CPT authorization to do that. But we would want to explore that a little more as you're developing that, because that may or may not be the case. This is one of those
But they would register as a course, so they wouldn't just show up. It would be registered as a course and they would pay to take the course, but it could be construed as an internship because I'm not doing any homework. I'm just, okay.
So we would likely encourage you to have students do CPT for that.
Okay.
Yeah, because that meets that integral to an established curriculum definition for CPT.
Okay.
So when you guys as students are out looking for jobs, one of the things we want you to keep in mind with OPT, with that, and with CPT to an extent, but with OPT, there's very little that the employer actually has to do to hire you on OPT. They look at your EAD card, which is your employment authorization document. They complete an I-9 for you, which is the form that's required of all employers to verify that everyone who works there has work authorization. But other than that, there's very little additional paperwork that has to be done by the employer. You're going to do almost all of it as the student who's applying for OPT, and you're going to work with our office on that application. So if you have employers who are a little hesitant to hire international students because they think it's going to be too hard, or they think there's too much paperwork involved for that initial period of OPT, that is not the case. And you can, help them understand that, no, you really don't have to do anything to hire me. You're going to do the exact same thing you do for any other employee. For costs, there are very few costs in terms of hiring someone who's on OPT. If they want to keep you and move you onto an H-1B visa, there is additional paperwork and cost with that. But also there are taxes that if you're on an F1, if you're on a student visa, the employer, you don't actually have to pay. We have these FICA taxes, there's Social Security tax and Medicare tax. And employers can not pay those for you if you're on an F1 visa because you're a non-immigrant. So theoretically, you would never use Social Security or Medicare tax, especially while you're on a student visa, because your intention right now isn't to stay in the United States. If you change status to like an H-1B, that is different. You do have to pay those taxes. As you're starting to interview for jobs and talk to employers, you don't actually need to have your work authorization in hand before you start interviewing and applying. You can go ahead and start interviewing and applying now, but you're going to be applying for work authorization probably at the same time you're applying for jobs. And I'm going to talk about those pesky questions about, do you need work authorization?
Bring pen and
One
paper.
of those pop up in the chat. So I have that too. And then the last thing, you know, some people feel like you have to have a green card or become a permanent resident to be able to work in the United States, and that is not true. There's a lot of different types of work authorization, and for students, OPT and CPT are the primary types of work authorization, and that does allow you to work legally in the US. The only caveat with that for students is that the work that you do has to be directly related to your field of study. So you're not going to be able to go and just get a side gig at Starbucks as a barista. That is outside of the scope of what you're authorized to do on OPT, but you can apply for all of those great jobs that you're looking for that are connected with your major. So Olga, let's go to the next one.
Do you understand? Makes sense.
So I know I saw one of these pop up in the chat about how do you answer these pesky employment questions on the job application. There are two questions that employers are legally allowed to ask you pre-hire. And they're going to look different depending on how they're asked on the employment application, but they're generally going to look something like, question number one, do you have work authorization in the United States? I've seen this as, do you have work authorization in the US, or do you have unrestricted work authorization in the US? Those questions are different, and you would answer those differently as an F1 student. So what we would typically tell students for this question is, if the question is, do you have work authorization in the United States? If you were in the last semester of your program, you know that you're applying for OPT, you've never done OPT before at the master's level, there's no reason why you will not get work authorization post-graduation. So we would say, if the question is, do you have work authorization in the United States? You can say yes to this question. But you need to be able to let the employer know, I have OPT, but it's starting on June 1. So I can't start working for you until June 1. If the question is asked, do you have unrestricted work authorization in the United States? You do need to answer that question no, because OPT does have restrictions such that you can only work directly related to your field of study. So you do have to be mindful of how the question is worded when you're answering it. The other question that you're going to see, the second one, is, do you or will you need visa sponsorship? An alternative version of this question that we often see is, do you now or will you ever need visa sponsorship? So the first version's the broader version of that question. The second version is, in theory, in the future, at some point, might you need visa sponsorship? So I always talk to students, you know, we try, when you talk to our office about this, we're going to talk to you about this in terms of, what is your intent? Do you intend to work for this employer only for the duration of your OPT, and then you're going to take all of your skills and return to your home country and get a great job there? If that is your intent, you can say no. You do not need visa sponsorship. But if your intent is to work for that company long-term, if everything works, you love the job, they love you, and they want to keep you, and your intention is to continue to work for that employer, then you want to say, yes, I will need visa sponsorship. What you don't want to do with this question is you don't want to answer it and just say, no, I don't need visa sponsorship, because I know if I say yes, I'm going to get thrown out of the pile of applicants. While that may be true with some employers, it is really important that you answer this question honestly based on your intent for working in the future in the United States. Because let's say, and I, as someone who has worked in HR and, working with lots of staff and employees previously, if I had somebody come to me and they said, no, I don't need visa sponsorship, and we hire them on OPT and they start working, and then 3 weeks later, they come to us and say, oh, haha, I do need visa sponsorship. Can you move me to an H-1B now? That really sours the relationship with the employer. And I have seen cases, there's not a lot of them, but I have seen cases where students on OPT have actually had their offers rescinded because they felt that the person lied to them and was not honest with them in filling out the application. So there's no magic answer to question number 2. The answer to question number 2 really has to be your best answer to this question at the time based on what your intent as an employee is. If you want to work for them forever and you really, really hope that they're going to provide you with visa sponsorship and you can't work for them beyond OPT, you should probably say yes to this question. You will need visa sponsorship. So Olga, let's go to the next slide. And then this is something we wanted to throw in here that kind of connects with the question around employment. And we really want you thinking about how you list this on your resume. You guys have lots of different opportunities. You're going to be able to do some really cool stuff where you go work with a company and come up with some great ideas, but you're not actually giving them anything. You're not providing any service to them. They're not giving you anything. So that might be more of an academic project. An internship is typically something where there is a benefit to the employer. You are there, you are providing them with some sort of service. You are doing work for them while you're there. You may or may not be getting paid for that work. But it is important that you want to differentiate these things on your CV. So don't call something that is an academic project an internship, because one thing that we have started to see is the USCIS is the agency that does all of our immigration benefits. So if the company wants to sponsor you on H-1B, that would go through the USCIS. They may ask for a copy of your resume or CV that may get submitted with an H-1B petition. And if you have an internship listed that was really an academic project and you didn't provide anything to that, there were no services, the company didn't get anything as a benefit to having you there, you just gave them some ideas that may or may not come to fruition, then the USCIS could ask you, if you have an internship listed, they could say, where's your CPT authorization for this internship? Where's your work authorization? If it was an internship where you were doing work. And if you don't have a corresponding work authorization, it could impact your ability to get an H-1B or even a green card in 5 to 10 years down the road. So for the different things that you're doing, and we know that you guys have lots of different really interesting opportunities and ways to connect with employers, on your resume or CV, be really mindful about how you're listing things, and know that if you do list something as an internship or a work experience, you should be able to document the work authorization that corresponds with that period of time. And so I think that's all our slides. Is that right, Olga? I think we're going to open it up for questions now.
I have a question.
Go for it.
So, wait, actually, give me 1 second. Let me just organize my thought because I had multiple questions. Yeah, so the first thing is, since you said that OPT is gives you 30 days, 3 months of period to try to find a job, but you don't have to apply for it before you get a job. So when do you think is the appropriate time to really apply and that I can get it at a perfect timing when I graduate?
Olga, you want to do that one?
I mean, generally, because of possible kind of long processing times, we generally recommend to apply earlier rather than later, just because so that you could get your OPT in time. Because when you apply for OPT, you will actually select the start date that you want for your OPT. And like the start date can be any day within 60 days of your program end date.
Okay, I see. So I can essentially set it at July. So when I graduate, I can utilize that OPT time.
Right. So so if you're graduating kind of in the spring, right? So like for this spring, your program end date will be May 18th. So you could start your OPT application now because it is like within the 90-day period before your program end date. And then you could request for your OPT to start as early as May 19th or as late as July 17th or any day in between.
Okay, understood. My second question is that, let's just say, because we only have 10 classes in the MFE program, I'm taking 1 math class and 2 engineering class, but I end up getting an internship or full-time, like an internship at a consulting firm, but consulting, even though it's like, it's business, it has nothing to do with engineering and math. How will the OISS and the SEVIS like review my CPT application?
Well, so you're talking about like CPT during like this semester while you're still a student, right? I'm just
Right.
Yeah, I mean, so like in order for us to approve CPT, it has to be kind of related to your academic program, right? It has to be connected to your academics. So as I was like mentioning earlier, like we could authorize CPT if it's required by the program, if you're doing it for credit, or if it's currently we do authorize CPT if it's directly related to one of your courses that you're taking at the time of like CPT.
Right.
So we will need some confirmation from your academic advisor that what you are going to do during the internship is kind of an integral part of your academic curriculum.
Okay, so let's just say, even though consulting does not connect to any of my courses, my academic advisor, which is Professor Keish, I believe, can basically just approve it, saying this is related to the MFE program. Doesn't have to be related to class directly, right?
It has to be connected to a more specific class, because we will, like when approving, your advisor will list class name, class number, class name, and then we'll provide a brief kind of description of how the internship is directly related to this specific course.
Right. So if I'm taking 3 like GBUS graduate business class, they're like finance and accounting, stuff like that, but I'm getting a data science job. It's very highly related to MFE, but it doesn't relate to my class. What do I do with that problem?
So in that case, unfortunately, if the work that you're doing in the internship isn't related to courses that you're taking, you may not be able to get a CPT authorization. For curricular practical training, it's really important to remember this is not simply a way to work. You want to think of CPT, it's academic first and work second. So
Okay.
it always needs to be directly related to what you're learning. What you're doing in an internship should be reinforcing knowledge and skills that you're learning in the classroom. So if that is not the case, it may not be an experience that qualifies for CPT.
Okay, got it. So
Amanda, hold on. So what
I
you're
just
saying?
want to chime in. Oh, sorry,
Yeah.
Professor.
You go.
I just want to, just one thing. So you're saying that if Remus took a class in the spring about consulting, but he actually ends up doing the consulting work in the fall while he's taking a finance class, they will only look at the classes that he's taking during that semester, not the overall idea of the program?
Because we don't have consulting class, but a lot of people go into consulting.
But but you're not gonna be consulting on how to open a Starbucks, right? You're gonna be consulting.
Yeah, the question is more around, like, consulting is really broad. So what are you consulting on? You
Right.
know, what are the topics that you're doing in that work? You know, it's generally, if the consulting work that you're doing is finance related, then it may be something that fits in really well, but it has to be related to your coursework.
Oh no.
It has to be connected to your, so it can't be, you should not be doing, and this is for CPT, keep in mind, like this,
Right.
you can't do consulting that is, you can't do like management consulting, because that's not what you're studying in this program.
So I can only do business and finance consulting.
It has to be directly related to the major that you're studying. That is correct. And if that is not the case, then you would want you'd schedule a time to meet with Olga about what you're doing and see if it's going to work or not.
May I ask a question regarding the management consulting? There's such a heavy component of finance and financial management in all of the management consulting work. It's a gray area, it seems. There really is. None of the decisions in management consulting are made without a financial component.
And
honestly, and now with data analytics and financial analytics and so forth. So if it's specified, if Ramos can find truthfully a financial component or aspect of a management consulting internship role, would that be okay?
It's so hard for us to answer those theoretical questions. So,
I understand.
Anameta, like, theoretically, maybe. But we would need some more information to be able to say yes or no for sure. I mean, what we really want to understand is that there is a direct connection, so that the duties that are happening in this internship, the things that are being learned in this internship, you can draw lines back to the coursework and the curriculum. And we understand that that's not really clear cut for every single thing, but like, how would you map those two together to make them make sense?
so the only way I can think of is, let's just say I get a consulting job at firm ABC, and then they said, this is a management consulting internship. You'll be working on financial planning, data analytics. So when I see those words on my basic like job offer, what my job will be entail, could that be, can I make the connection there? Like the job detail and my current coursework? Like, for example, if management consulting is that's financial planning and financial analysis, then I'm taking GBUS 421, which is fixed income. Even though we're dealing with bonds, not whatever assets they're selling, I'm still doing some sort of financial analytics. So that could be tied up. Like, would that slide? Or is that like still a no?
Theoretically, maybe.
Okay.
I mean, I know it's a very unsatisfying answer, but it's one of the, like, until we have a better sense of what you're actually doing and what your curriculum looks like, it's really hard for us to say with 100% certainty, yes, this works, no, this doesn't.
But I think the bottom line, Amanda, and this is where you're very helpful, is that now Remus is aware that when he gets an offer, he should make sure to let them know that it just shouldn't say consulting work, period, right? It needs to be as detailed as they can be. And I'm sure Ramos is not going to take a job, you know, counting stopper companies. He's going to be doing something that relates to his program. But you don't, I guess we have to be very as detailed and aware as possible. And that's the idea of us, Amanda, coming to us. She's not going to be able to tell us okay or not, but Ramos, be aware that, you know, words count here, right?
Okay.
And I will also add, so like to be eligible for CPT, like you have to have a job offer first. And then on the job offer, we do ask for it to include like your job responsibilities as well. So.
Yaron, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah, that's okay. I was just gonna chime in because I know students take pre-completion OPT for, you know, for Ramos' concern, but maybe you don't want to use that OPT because it's your time after you graduate. But that's one option if you definitely want that job and it's definitely not related to your curriculum. Yeah.
That's a great point, Yaron. If you get some sort of great internship and it's directly related to your field of study, but wouldn't qualify you for CPT, pre-completion OPT is an option. So we don't do a ton of that at Lehigh, but it is an option as well if you find this great thing but can't make CPT work. So hopefully, you know, we think that right now we can make a lot of things work for this, but if you find something that you're not sure about, you can talk to Olga about it and see what your options would be.
I have two questions. First, when it comes to your CPT, since the internship was you're eligible for CPT as soon as you're done with your final examinations, when do we file for it if we do have an offer letter?
Huh?
Do we do it right? Can we do it right away?
You could. I mean, typically we say, I would say at least maybe like 3 weeks before the start date, just to make sure that there is enough time, you know, for everyone involved, you know, to process the request.
Of course. Also, my second question is regarding graduation. I say if you're graduating in spring versus graduating in May, the summertime. Say you're graduating in spring, Jan 2023. You will immediately have to file for an H-1B in that session itself on March, right? Because I have concerns about, because the advantages of graduating in summer against graduating in spring are the fact that you have, I think, 7-8 months before you file your first H-1B. So I'm just not sure about this. So if you could just confirm this.
So if you're working for an employer who is like almost all the employers where they're subject to the H-1B cap and you have to go through the H-1B lottery, those are all, the registration period for that now is during the month of March. So if you do graduate in December and you start working for an employer in January, they would have to prepare that for you almost immediately after you start working. With that said, you guys are all you are in a STEM field. So you would be eligible for 3 years of OPT. So the 1 year of post-completion OPT, plus if you are working for an E-verified employer and they're going to do your training plan, you get that 24 months of OPT. So that would give you multiple chances at the H-1B lottery. And that's one of the biggest advantages to doing a STEM major. You know, is there an advantage to graduating in December versus May? Yes and no. You know, it does give you effectively have more time to sort of work and prove yourself to the employer before they have to register you for the H-1B lottery if you graduate in May. Does it really have a huge impact in the real world? If you're in a STEM field, it probably doesn't have as big of an impact as the internet tells you that it does.
Okay, thank you.
So sorry guys, just a quick one. So what's the main what's the main difference between OPT and H-1, you know, aside from the duration, of course?
You want me to do that one, Olga? Or do you want to do that?
Well, the only difference, like the big difference I can think of, and then you can add, Amanda, is like for OPT, it's not employer specific, right? You can work for any employer, you can easily change employers. You don't really depend on the employer, right? But for H-1B, it's more employer specific, and then you can only work for the employer that filed your H-1B.
I would just add to that, you have a lot of flexibility when you're on OPT. You can change jobs, you can work for multiple different employers. You can, I saw Ramos asked about startups. You can start your own business when you're on OPT. And once you transition to an H-1B, you are only allowed to work for that employer who's sponsoring your H-1B. So it's much more restrictive. And if you are working for, like if you started your own company, if once you transition to an H-1B, you would also have to transition all of the ownership, not the ownership, but the work of that startup to other people, because you can't do both. And H-1B currently doesn't allow for sponsorship for people who are running their own startups. So if you are doing a startup, I would strongly suggest that you talk to an immigration attorney about other sponsorship options, because there's a couple of other things that we are not experts in for entrepreneurs who are trying to do startups. But there's, like Olga said, the flexibility on OPT is really, really nice, because it lets you see if you like the job that you're doing, and if not, you have options to change.
Okay, but then it has to be
question regarding immigration attorneys. Do we have a good list or a relationship with a couple of them? Because I've had now 3 or 4 students, 2 of whom have gone out to immigration attorneys, which they didn't know really well. I guess they had a good reputation. They were incredibly expensive, not surprising. So I was just wondering if we have people that our students could go to.
We do have a list. We have a number of attorneys who work with us on green card issues. We can send that list to students.
Okay.
Attorneys aren't cheap though. So we want you will have to pay for the service. You will have to pay this. Some attorneys will do a really brief 30-minute consultation for free, but beyond that, there is a charge for that service.
Yes, of course. I just meant that it's easier and nicer to work with people we know than just sending them out in vaporware.
Absolutely. Yeah, we have a list. If anybody wants that, we're happy to provide that.
Okay. Thank you.
That would be great.
Hi, I got a question. So what if I want to change a job when I'm on OPT with one employer?
With OPT, it's I guess very easy to change jobs. Like the only that you would need to keep in mind is that to keep us updated on any possible changes. Like on OPT, you just have to report all of your employment information to us so that your immigration record, your CVIS is properly updated.
Oh, okay. So thank you. So when I'm on H-1B, it's difficult to change a job, right?
So if you're changing jobs, the new employer has to file a new H-1B for you before you can start work. So they would have to, you get an employer who's sponsoring you for H-1B, and then you want to change jobs. The new employer has to go through the same process the first employer went through to be able to hire you. And that has to happen every time you change jobs. Once you get selected in the lottery for H-1B, it makes it a little bit easier because you don't have to go through the lottery again. But if you change, there's just a lot of paperwork and expense, and it does cost. So for most employers, we're looking at $5,000 ish for filing fees for an H-1B, and then and then any legal fees are going to be in addition to that. So there is a substantial investment in both time and money for employers to sponsor H-1B. So that's why sometimes you will run across employers who don't want to do it, because it's time consuming and expensive. And if you are changing jobs, the process has to be done anytime you change jobs on an H-1B.
Okay, thank you. So, so that means I can change a job whenever I find another employer who are willing to sponsor me, or do I have to wait until my current H-1B is gonna expire in a short time?
So if you find another employer who's willing to sponsor you, you can change jobs as soon as they file a new H-1B for you. So if you find employers who are willing to do that, they're very often willing to do it at the point that they hire you, not at the end of your H-1B.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, I have a quick question. So like if you said about the sponsorship, if you want to work long, you need to be honest to say you need the sponsorship. But just like the long, it means you've been on the OPT. So do we need to add the same period into the OPT, just like 3 years or 1 year?
I'm not sure I totally understand your question, but I'm going to answer what I think you asked. In terms of you are eligible for STEM, but you want to make sure with employers that they are enrolled in E-Verify. You should be able to look that up on the E-Verify website, and then they would have to do some additional paperwork. It's not very much for STEM OPT. But generally, you know, if you know the employer is enrolled in E-Verify, you could say you have 3 years. You should likely have 3 years of work authorization. If you want to work for them beyond that, you would need sponsorship.
Okay, so get it. Just like we have 3 years. Okay, thank you.
Hi, I have a quick question. Can you travel on OPT after graduation out of country?
You are allowed to travel outside the US. So generally, like if you do to come back, you will need to have like your, of course, your valid passport, your valid F1 visa, because you're still in F1 status while on OPT. You will need to have the EAD card with you, your I-20 signed for travel within 6 months. And then we do recommend having like a job offer letter with you as well.
If your F1 visa expired, do you still have like, can you still travel? Do you need to reapply for a F1 visa, even though you're no longer going to the school, but you're still under OPT for the school that you went to?
Right, that's correct. So you will need to apply for a new F1 visa to be able to come back.
So but you need to do that outside the US.
Yes, you cannot renew your visa in the US. It can only be done outside the US.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
So for the if we have the I-20, it's valid. We can stay in the US and study, but if our F1 visa on the passport is expire, we have to renew it if we are leaving and then coming back to the US, right? But if I don't leave the US, my F1 visa on the passport doesn't have to be like on time. Okay.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct.
I always like to think of your visa as like the key to get in the door. Once you're in the door, you can set the key to the side. But if you leave the house again, you need to have the key to get back in. So anytime you're trying to come in, you always need to have a valid visa. The only time your visa has to be valid is when you're trying to come in the United States. That helps me think about what your visa is. It's like your entry key.
How likely do they refuse to give you the entry key? No, yeah.
On OPT, I mean, so that's a great question. You know, I've had plenty of students over the years. I would guess Olga would say the same thing. Like, we've had a number of students who have been successful in getting visas when they're on OPT. I think the most important thing for you to keep in mind is that the F1 visa is a non-immigrant visa. So you still have to show ties to your home country, and you still have to show that you're not intending to immigrate to the United States. So they may ask you some more questions about why are you doing this job? What are you planning on doing after you do OPT? You know, if your answer to them saying after you do OPT, you're going to stay in the US and get a green card, that might impact your approval for your F1 visa. So you have to be able to tell the visa officer like what you're trying to learn, and you still have to be able to show those ties to your home country and that you're not intending to immigrate to the United States. That's the most important thing for you to keep in mind when you go for an F1 visa interview.
Okay, but you're saying there are a bunch of precedent that people got their visa on their OPT.
We never want you to think that it's a sure thing. We're never going to tell you there's 100% chance that you're going to get your F1 visa, because there's always a slight chance of denial. But we have had good experience with our students on OPT being able to get new visa as well on OPT.
Okay, great. Yeah, I mean, yeah, the whole point of going back is, I think that would show strong tie. Thank you.
Okay, so just one. Can you travel on H1B?
Yes, you can. If you have changed status in the United States, if you changed in the US from F1 to H1B, you would have to go to the embassy to get an H1B visa when you come back. So you have to make sure you have a visa to match while you're trying to come back. So for many of our students, they're going to, you know, find a great job. The employer's going to sponsor them. They're going to change status in the US from F1 to H1B. So the next time they leave the country, they have to plan a trip to the US embassy to apply for that H1B visa.
Right, okay, excellent, thank you.
Is it true that H1B visa only lasts for a year? I mean, I'm talking about the visa, not the status.
No, so visa durations are based on a number of things. Most of I could tell you at Lehigh, almost all of our employees who are on H1B, if they go for a visa interview to get that H1B visa, it's going to be the same duration as their H1B approval. So if we do a 3-year H1B, in most cases, our Lehigh employees on H1Bs get 3-year visas. So generally that expiration date is going to be connected with how long your H1B is approved for.
Okay.
But it also
is that nationality specific? Because I've heard
also, that was the next thing I was going to say is visas are also based on, if you want to get really excited about immigration and learn something new today, you can Google reciprocity tables. So there's this set of what we call reciprocity tables, and there's one for every single country. And there are agreements between the United States and other countries that say for this type of visa, this is how long we're going to issue this visa for and how much it's going to cost if there's any additional cost. So you could actually Google reciprocity tables, find China and find H1B and learn how long we've agreed with China to issue H1B visas for.
I'm looking at it now, it's 12 months.
So if you're from China,
it's
you're
1 year.
Get a 12-month visa for your H1B. So it is nationality specific.
What? Oh, I always thought it was 3. What?
No, it's 1 year.
Yeah.
Could you extend that?
And it's all different for different types of visas.
I'm talking about the visa, Ramos. I'm not talking about the status. You do get the status for 3 years, but once you leave, you have to get a new visa to get in.
Oh, I see. But you can still, like, if you're just working in the US 3 years nonstop.
Yes, if you don't leave, yeah, that's okay.
You may never, in some cases, if you change status from F1 to H1B and you just stay in the United States for the full time you're on H1B and your employer's helping you, sponsoring you for a green card, you may never get an H1B visa actually stamped in your passport if you're just staying in the United States. So, but you may if you need to travel outside of the country.
Okay. Amanda, can you guys hear me?
We can.
Okay, I just want to say one thing. I think to your last points, Amanda, I think the safest thing to do, I think for an international students is actually you study in the US, you get a job in the US, and you stay as long as you can, right, to eliminate any kind of potential risk of you not be able to come back. Especially, yeah, I know you want to go see your family every year, right? But to avoid all the risks associated with the visa coming back and coming in and coming out, is you stay until you're done whatever OPT you have.
Right.
What do you think about that?
So Patrick, not traveling is always the safest thing to do. And I would love you to come and like tell that to all of the students at Lehigh to get everyone to not travel this summer, because we have real concerns about the challenges of travel for this summer, particularly with COVID and changing travel and lockdown and all of that. There's a ton of uncertainty right now with travel. So Patrick, you are 100% right. The safest thing to do is always to stay put. But that's giving up a lot. And many of our students are not willing to make that choice because they want to see family. So if you feel like you need to travel, what I would say is, communicate with our office, because we're going to help you understand. We're not going to make your choice for you. We're never going to tell you, do not travel. Well, I would say we told people that last year, do not travel. But we're never going to say, do not travel, because it's your personal choice to travel. What we're going to help you do is understand the challenges and help you determine like, what's your risk tolerance and where do you fall in the scale of like, it's worth it to me to go home versus I really feel like I should just stay in the US until I get my green card, because that's the most safe thing to do. So.
Yeah, that has been my experience, my personal experience, and I've seen others as well, because it's tough enough to get that job waiting for you, but then if you take a chance and then you can't come back to this country for whatever reason, you can't come back. And you're right. The idea between this F1 is that, well, we want to make sure you're not here to stay anywhere. Well, you're just studying, getting some practical experience, and then going home. So you have that thing against you to begin with. So if you have a job lined up, I wouldn't take any chance at all. I would stick around and then go get the job, do whatever you want. And then when it's done, whatever happens, happens. But yes, do not take a chance, especially now with everything that's going on.
We like that advice, and we will likely be giving fairly similar advice to students for this summer, because travel is really unpredictable right now, especially China. Like Ramos says, China has changed very much in the last month or so. And if you choose to leave, you may not be coming back in August. So we have some real concerns about travel for the summer.
Okay, so if there's any more questions.
I think we're about at time. So
we have time anyway.
Thank you guys for having us today. You guys asked some great questions. So we always
love this is very informative. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Lucky to have you both.
Thank you.
Professor, do you mind keeping the room open?
Yes, it is open right now.
Okay.
But hold on, give me a second, because I think it's still recording. Hold on a second. Let me reclaim the host a second. Just wait a minute.
And if you do have questions, remember Olga is your first point of contact, and she can answer almost any question that you ask her. And good luck with the rest of your semester.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.
Right. So, hello, is anybody in here?
Yes.
Yeah. So off the record, I was just wondering. So, what's the timeline of, say, of a good story? Where you study, work,
Oh, I think
Anyway.
people from the International Student Office have left. I think we're about to end.
Hey, Olu, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing your name right, but I think
Yeah,
that's very specific. It's not, there's no general timeline. No, the
Right.
range is too wide to give you an answer.
Yeah,
Right,
because
right.
before
It's
I
based
think,
on your situation, on your employer's
Yeah.
situation, and the change of policy. So
Correct.
yeah,
I
so
mean,
it's very personal.
yeah, I mean, honestly, it's just a random curiosity. I was just wondering, but I mean, that's fine.
yeah.
Yeah.